Hello. For the discussion, we were asked, what do we believe a Chicana or Chicano is and why? When reading this question, the first thing that popped in mind of what makes a Chicana or a Chicano was a Mexican American. That was always something that was brought to me, or not brought to me, but something that I always heard. So I just assumed like, oh yeah, it's a Mexican American. But after watching the videos and reading the articles, there's this one video that really, like, I guess gave me a better understanding of what a Chicana or Chicano really is. And so the video was called "What is a Chicano?" and they were interviewing an older man, and they were asking him like, hey, like, what do you think makes a Chicano? And he was like, well, yo creo que lo que hace alguien Chicano es si tienen una mezcla de dos culturas. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, like that makes sense. Like completely, like just because sometimes, like, I have friends from Guatemala, Honduras, and they're not Mexican, but they were raised in the United States, but obviously they have their own cultures. And like, even though we're not, like, I'm Mexican and they're not, we still could relate in certain things. Like, we have some similar struggles. And I think that it really comes down to the experiences that one faces that truly makes them a Chicana or Chicano. Like, obviously, I do take in consideration the culture and the traditions and kind of the mindset that they built throughout the years, but I think the experiences are what really makes them who, like, a Chicana or a Chicano. Like, I personally, something that I know many can relate with is having Mexican parents that only speak Spanish. I was raised by a single mother who had to go to work, and she would leave me pretty much at school as much as possible, so I'd be staying for after school programs in sports, just so I can, like, she won't have to pay for a babysitter. But pretty much, anyways, besides the point. I spend my time at school pretty much all day, and I only spoke English because that's the language that was talked pretty much the whole entire time. So obviously speaking English the whole day, and then having to go back home and having to talk to my mom in Spanish and family members, it was like something difficult. And I think everyone goes through that, especially having to speak Spanish is just hard because in my personal experiences, I've been made fun of because sometimes I can't pronounce the R's right. Or, like, for instance, tierra or something. For some reason, some individuals find it funny how I pronounce it. And it's something that has definitely brought an insecurity to me to this day. Because, I don't know, I feel like we can't really categorize ourselves to, like, Mexicans or American, just because in Mexican, like, if you kind of struggle speaking Spanish, you are either considered whitewash, or, like, a term that's used now, it's called a no sabo kid. And it's obviously, like, intimidating sometimes speaking to certain family members because like, something that I do is like, oh, like, I know the word, like, I want to say something to them, but I'm like, I don't know how to say it in Spanish. And it's obviously embarrassing because you're like, your parents are Mexican, but then again, you don't know how to speak Spanish. So I feel like that's something that we all go through, no matter our ethnicities. Like, we tend to have that, I guess, barrier sometimes with our own people, with Mexicans, as well as with Americans. I also wouldn't categorize myself as, like, American, just because I know my background. I know, like, my grandma, my grandparents, they're Mexicans, they speak Spanish. So categorizing myself, I guess, as an American, just an American, just doesn't seem right. Because sometimes I'm like, okay, I feel like too Mexican, or, like, too Hispanic to be categorized as a American. And I feel like that's really what comes down to it. The experiences that you face, having to translate for your parents, English documents to Spanish, having to, translate for conferences. I feel like we all go through the same things, and at the end of the day, our mentality is that's how it's built, going through all these things, and really brings us, as in a way, like, together, like, being able to relate to things. And yes, culture and traditions do matter. I'm not saying that they don't, but I personally don't celebrate Dia de los Muertos just for my religion, and I don't think, because I don't think by not celebrating it makes me any less of a Mexican. I think that yes, it's important to, you know, celebrate them, but just because I don't celebrate it doesn't mean doesn't mean that I'm not considered a Chicana. But yeah, that's just my perspective. I just think it really comes down to your experiences, and having those two cultures brought to you. And yeah.